So I would like to call the Community Relations and Student Life Safety and Wellness Committee meeting to order. Are there any public comments?
None at this time.
All right, I guess I'll wait for Karen to get comfortable. Although we can start with Mrs. Lester. Perfect, I don't need Karen to be comfortable yet.
Sorry, Karen. Good evening, everybody. I am pleased to share tonight with you some of the results from our communications community survey that we did and are still doing. This is just to provide you with an update on the feedback we've received so far and what we're thinking as we're seeing the responses come in. So the first slide will just give, the first couple of slides will just give you a sense for who responded to the survey. We had, well, first, I guess I should say, we distributed the survey via email, text on the website. We also had a QR code, thanks to your idea, set up at White Marsh Township Day. Those are some of the ways in which we shared the link out to our parents, and we also included our Gold Card member email list in that. So we did get hopefully some residents who don't have children in our schools, and we had a total of distribution list of about 6,617 people, and then out of that, if we could go to the third slide there. We had a 600, I think we're up to 696. It's funny, the responses keep coming in, but that's about how many responses we have to date. And as you can see from the chart there, shows you the breakdown of, population-wise. So obviously our biggest responders were parents and guardians. And then in terms of age group, we have, again, people falling into that 31 to 50-year-old category as our biggest category of responders. Thanks. And then as we wanted to get a sense for, what devices people are using. So this is on the next slide, Drew. Of what they're using to access information. And again, I'm sure this doesn't cause a surprise to anybody, but smartphone is our biggest category of, people, how they're accessing our information. All right, so then we went into a couple different sections on the survey. And the first one had to do with what people wanted to learn about from us. We asked them, do you value the information we share about student activities, achievements, board news, and had them rank all of those things. And people, really want to hear about student achievements and the news that we want to share out, academic performance of our schools and district. And then, of course, all of the more pressing matters of school cancellations, transportation alerts, and upcoming events. Those were the other things that people ranked pretty highly in terms of wanting to hear about. And then we asked about how do you want to get this information? And as you can see from the numbers there, email is still preferred option over most, but texting is up there, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. And then you can see where the other items fell in that survey question. Then we went into our mass communication tools, which is like our email, phone blast, texting systems, things like the eFriday folder. And we asked specifically about the eFriday folders, whether or not people like them coming on Fridays or if they would prefer a different day of the week. And again, the results were a little bit surprising to me, but most said they liked getting it on a Friday. If they were to change it, they'd prefer getting it on a Monday instead of a Friday. And again, most people are, we're complimentary in terms of the email communication that we do send out being concise, easy to understand, not too much, just the right amount. So that was positive to hear from our community. And then as far as text communication, I was hoping to get a sense from people, could we use that function more? I don't use it a whole lot because I don't want to, always alarm people unnecessarily about things. But people again said, if you want to call my attention to an important email, sure, send me a text. That was, again, I thought that was an interesting response from this survey. So, and then again, people, want to get their transportation alerts and things like that via text as well. We also asked about printed publications. What do people find value in the various publications we mail or we mail out to them? And again, the results were very positive. A lot of people rank the activities calendar as being very, very important to them. So that's always good to see because that's a major project. I'm glad that people find it useful. Again, academic report and the year in review publications were also found valuable. And then we moved into the website. And here's where we talked to, we asked people, how often do you use it? We've got a high percentage of our population using the website pretty regularly. And again, the most common areas, we asked them where they go. As you would guess, lunch menus, calendars, PowerSchool, forms, those were all, big places for people to visit. And there was a suggestion to ask about whether or not people might find it useful to have sort of a video that would walk them through where to find different things on the website. And people said that they wouldn't find that useful. And again, ideally, we don't want them to have to use a video to navigate. It should be, something that's not hard for them to do. So, and then we asked about evaluating the website as a whole, respond true or false to the various statements you see across the bottom. And as you can see, the two areas that I think, we need to focus on are, people have said it's a little bit difficult to find things if they're not sure where to look for them first. And that they were having some difficulty navigating on the mobile version of our site. And so those are things that we'll kind of get into as we get farther along. And then we asked, is there one thing that you would improve upon? And again, there were some themes this was an open-ended response, but there were themes that emerged from the responses we got. And again, it was mobile version of the site, calendars, search feature, being able to find those forms that you want to get access to really quickly, and directory information for emailing staff, faculty. We asked, would you like an app? And resoundingly, people said yes. So that was, again, very valuable information to have and interesting to me. And then social media. Some of these results were pretty interesting too. Among the people who responded to our survey, Facebook still, is the favored social media platform of choice, with Instagram following up. And then we were kind of surprised to see a big chunk of people report that they don't use social media. So that was, that again, pretty surprising. So, and then frequency of use, how often do you go to the website to get, to social media to get information? Ranges from never to every day. Again, those were sort of interesting numbers to take a look at. And then your schools on social media. So we ask people, do you follow your child's school and PTO pages on Facebook? Most of them do. We asked, would you like your school to also have a presence? And the numbers were a little bit more split there. Quite a few people said yes, but quite a few people also said no. And when we asked them for their reasons, it was, it's just one more thing to keep track of. I don't feel like it's not, the people that said no, it was those kind of responses. The people who said yes, they just want to, they're more interested in seeing information that's specifically about their child's school rather than on a district level like the social media channels are for now. And again, if anybody wants to see any of these results in greater detail, I can certainly share them. We asked about CITV, which is our a television channel. And again, some of the responses here were pretty informative. We asked people how often do they access the content that's produced and shared there. And so many people said never. So that kind of made us realize we need to do a better job of promoting that as a tool that we use. And then, the follow-up question was, how do you access it? Because they can go, on actual television and look at it, or they can go on YouTube. And again, the numbers were kind of all over the place there. But, I'm sorry, that was the wrong. Yeah, access is, so again, there's, a lot of people do make use of the cable access channel that we have, and a lot of people are also going online. So, and then of what people watch, a lot of them are watching these meetings, so that's a good thing. People are staying informed, and again, they're watching the athletic events, music events, and I thought they gave some interesting ideas for other content, like showing old content that maybe was developed when we were first starting out with CITV as kind of a retro thing. And kind of filming other events that take place during the school day that parents or guardians might not be able to get to. And then again, more student produced content people were asking for. So where do we go from here? I feel these are some of my key takeaways so far. I think we can continue sharing the types of information that we're already sharing. People seem to find value in what we're putting out there, so we'll continue that, and we'll continue our printed publications even as we move so farther and farther to an online society. At least we know that people do value getting those printed publications still. Consider getting using text more often to call people's attention to things, and then again looking at a refresh of the website to address some of those issues that people brought up, and investigating the costs and the rollout of a district app, and like I said, promoting CITV content better. And then I'd like to follow up internally with some departments about some comments that came through in open-ended responses, and then talk to our administrative team about streamlining communication where we can, so that we're not, say something comes out of the community relations office on a Monday at 1, and then school sends out something later that day, the same day, and then it's, you're tracking down 2 emails, and which email was that in? If we can streamline things a little bit better, so that all of us know who's communicating what, on certain things, we can kind of try to avoid hitting people up with too much information at one time. And then, so does anybody have any questions at this point in terms of?
I do have a question, and it's in regards to, in the very beginning of the results, the student population who participated was extremely low, right? And so my question is, I guess with this survey, where we're looking for student engagement and we want to hear their voice, thinking of some ways that we can do it outside of survey, rate survey. I get, my kids would say that's old school, mom. So thinking about some ways to get their feedback beyond the survey, because I'm sure that they probably have it. They just felt, I'm not doing the survey because it's not something that this generation would do. So just something to thinking about going forward, not just with this survey, but anytime we're looking for student voices.
Is it possible that the low student response was due to the fact that they get a lot of their stuff on Canvas? They don't really use the Facebook, like any,
Yeah, I think that,
because like the, right, right. Right. But yeah, I just wondered if they didn't have a lot to say. But no, it's okay. No, I just didn't think they may not have a lot to say because they're just, this is what they usually use, and they can't, they're too busy to be bothered to.
Yeah, there's certainly, we can certainly look at better ways to reach the students to get more feedback from them. Maybe it's a matter of having it announced on, during the announcements, in school, and really calling their attention to it, or I think, going to events, and maybe even just putting up the QR code that we had around the building or something could, result in a few more responses.
For the preference of email versus text, do our systems, especially like transportation alerts, have an opt-in option so that I could check off I prefer text alerts for transportation?
No, and that
Okay.
was a common request in some of the feedback that we got. Is there a way for me to prioritize how I get my messages? I don't believe that Blackboard allows us to do that. That Blackboard is the mass communication system that we use. But I feel like that I've been hearing that refrain for so long. I feel like they should be working on something that would allow parents to do that. So maybe we can check in with the vendor and see if they've come along, in order to talk.
Do you know if each school runs their individual web page, or is it centralized in terms of
On the website?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have point people at each building, right, who
Each
do the
building.
announcements and everything. Yeah. But sometimes often rely on Kim to assist too.
Each school, one of the secretaries is responsible for populating the page, but they work with the administration team to make sure that all the content is there that needs to be there. So they have access to the calendar and the school calendar and the school announcements, and then we populate the district announcement part.
I'm wondering, I did my survey, but since in talking to neighbors and some other feedback came in around, like, how do we standardize some information so it's all in the same place? I'll use a relevant example now. The COVID reporting form, on one school it's under attendance, and another school it's under forms and documents. So as a parent is trying to navigate between multiple schools, it's a bit of a search for them. So I'm wondering if there's certain pieces, as a team kind of takes a look at this, are there certain pieces of information that we need to standardize will all be in the same place? So regardless of what school you're looking to notify, it's all in the same place, regardless of which website you're on.
That totally makes sense. We often have something like that. And with with the absence forms, we usually have a place where they all live, and then people point to that. Kind of like when we get to the summer reading, they live somewhere, and a bunch of different things are going to point to that. So that's definitely something that we can look at for the future, and just make sure that some of those don't get scattered. Thanks.
I'm wondering, and kind of still worrying, that we're maybe not capturing the voices of families who don't speak English. So do you have any data around that? And I guess my wondering too, so I know we talked intentionally about this before the rollout, of how we are going to make sure that, like, right on that homepage, right when the survey pops up, that the home language is there. So like, I just noticed that, like, the middle school has the survey embedded on their site, which is great. But when I change the language, it's still in English. Like, the survey itself is not changing. So it's something that needs to be answered right now. I just think if we're really trying to capture everyone's voice, then we really need to be a lot more intentional about how we send out in home languages to make sure that we're giving that opportunity for families to access.
I would agree. I think that your question about this, spurred a lot of questions for me, because it's not just about this survey; it's about how we communicate everything, right? So, yeah, I think maybe a topic for a future CRSL meeting for sure would be how do we and Kim and I have been actually attending some conferences, workshops on just that subject. So we're still learning about it ourselves. But I agree. I think we need to do a better job of trying to make sure that we are speaking to everybody and making it easy for people to access what we're sending out. The survey itself, I believe what you may be seeing on the website is because the survey is in Google. And if you go to Google and do it, I think you can convert it, but maybe
I'm a parent. If I'm a parent, microphone. If I'm a parent and I go to the middle school website, if I see the survey there, if it's not in my language, I'm not even going to know to go into Google. Do you know what I mean? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely lots to think about there.
Sorry. Is there an archive or a digest of all the emails? So rather than searching through your own inbox, if you've deleted them, you can say, like, oh, I just want to go to all the CMS emails I got this year and search for that thing.
You mean somewhere on the website that people could access them? Or
somewhere like communications that were sent, like, as a middle school parent, you would have gotten these emails. So when I'm looking for, like, the beginning of year email or
that's an interesting idea.
I don't know if it's more, it ties in more to, as you're doing website improvements, just making sure they're searchable and indexable. So that way, most people who don't know what they want, they'll search for COVID, or they'll search for, and making sure that stuff can pop up as you're working with the vendor on this.
And something that may have made it easier, I noticed this year the emails from the middle school and high school have changed. So it starts off with class of 2022 or class of 2026 for eighth graders. That's very helpful. I know as a parent, it's very helpful because I know which child I need to, I'm paying attention to. So it's that actually was very helpful, that whoever made that suggestion, that's helpful.
I have something to point out about the forms. Is I just checked, and if they're made through Final Site on that, so if they're made through the vendor that we use for the website and they're on the website, they'll translate. So if they translate the page and they end up going to the form would be translated if we use that. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. Mm-hmm. But it's, so like the absence forms right now would would translate because they're made on our site.
Right. So I'll just since we're sort of talking about the website, I'll move into we were, again, based on the feedback, thinking that perhaps, we should form a committee of stakeholders to kind of take a closer look at the website and all of its various pieces, and spend a couple meetings, asking people what they think and gathering, again, more detailed feedback specifically about the website, and then use that to guide some decision making moving forward, perhaps with a redesign of the website. I don't think we want to move away from our current vendor because they've been really good to us, and we, for the most part, the feedback was very positive about the website. So I don't think we need to, totally revamp everything. But it's probably time for a refresh, and then that same committee could also help us with thinking about an app. Because I guess sometimes I'm not quite sure if people know exactly what an app will give them that a mobile version of our site won't. So, I want to tease some of that information out and, see if we can kind of, again, get more specific and then from there, develop some suggestions to bring back to the committee.
I have, in terms of the committees, when those committees are formed, something to think about. I've been on a couple of the school committees, and where it's all inclusive of parents, students, faculty, and the student population is very low. And so I talked to a couple of students and asked why. I even asked one of the students, and it's intimidation because they're not sure that with all the adults in the room or on that committee that their voice is going to be heard. So a suggestion would be to potentially form the committees where is a committee of peers. And you might have multiple committees so that the students feel like they do have a voice. Because if you form a committee and the student is there and they don't give any feedback, then it's kind of null and void, no purpose for the student to be there.
You mean like have just a group of students?
Correct,
And have them
a
meet
group of students,
sure.
and then collect that feedback. Yeah.
Other thoughts, or is the timelines and I was thinking, to carry this out over the next year with the hope of, doing something, unveiling a new website and perhaps an app by the fall of next year. Does that timeline sound okay to everybody?
You have traffic statistics for website?
The Google Analytics,
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We do use that, and they mirror a lot of what the survey said, about where people go to visit, and
So I assume fall's the peak use, so unveiling it then would make the most sense.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, we definitely have. It's interesting to watch the numbers spike after, and again, with over the last year with COVID and everything, every time an email would go out, you can see a big spike in the visits to the website and everything. So, and again, time, coincides with the beginning of the school year, end of the school year, all that stuff. So we do keep track of that.
Well, thank you so much for doing all of that. I think this is really crucial information, and will help you do your job moving forward. So that's
I
awesome.
love this kind of stuff.
So thank you for doing that. And will you leave open the survey?
Yeah, I don't see any reason to close it. I guess, does anybody think we should send it out again via email, or just leave it on, let it live on the website somewhere? And okay. All right. Yeah.
That's great. Any other questions for Ms. Lester or Ms. Newell? The next item is the school calendar and talking about holidays. So I remember bringing this up several years ago and asked, this may have been even before you, Dr. Christian, just curious as to why we picked the school holidays that we picked. Why is our spring break where it is, where other school districts have it earlier in March or whatever it is? So I think a lot of the answer is this is how we've always done it. And that's fine. But just the way that the world is moving, and I know working in Philadelphia School District, like there's so many more various cultures that are represented in our calendar with regard to days off. So I'm really glad we got an email from a community member, a parent, about that topic, which was great because then it brought top of mind for us to have a discussion about would there possibly be any additional holidays we would want to add, possibly change, and just look into. So before we start with that, can you can you just let me know? I know we've already approved, like we always approve the start date, like way ahead of time. Have we already approved the calendar for next year? That's already done.
Correct.
So then so that's done. Conversation's sort of over. We've already established the start date for
Correct.
next year. But we still can adjust the days off for the next year. For 23, 24.
23, 24, nothing's been established.
Okay. No, 22, 23 is done. Okay. So just wanted to make sure we put that there for just logistical purposes. Other than that, whoever wants to talk. Anybody have any thoughts? I know one of the emails that we have is the list of the different cultural, I think it's one of the attachments that we have in our emails, the different holidays that are celebrated at different districts. So just want to open it for discussion to get your thoughts.
I guess my first question would be is why couldn't an amendment be put forth to add them for the 22-23 school year? If holidays, not changing start date, end date. But if it was the will of the body and the interest of the community, then an amendment be put up to make modifications for next school year as opposed to waiting 2 school years.
You could. There's an agreement between the district and the Colonial Education Association to have the calendar a copy to CEA by December 1st of each year, and then they have 60 days to review it and respond. They don't take 60 days, but they do survey their members and then get back to us with input. So we'd have to respectfully go through that same process. And that would put us into July. So is it possible? Yes. I could talk to their leadership team. But it does create, if it pushed us into June or July, we want to have it published so people can plan for their school year. So not impossible, just a little bit tight.
And I think also have to keep in mind that, not a lot, but some families have probably already planned vacations around the calendar, the winter break, the spring break. We can't necessarily add more days without taking them from someplace else. So I think the most notice we can give people if we're going to change things would be better for everybody. So I'm not saying we can't change it. I'm just
Also, can we just talk a little bit about what is our practice if somebody does have a religious holiday on a day when we are in school? Are they automatically excused from school? Are they excused from homework? Are they excused from a test if
our test given.
Our tests given on some of these holidays when we might physically be in school? But what accommodations do we make for families and students?
We make accommodations for our students' assessments for every single holiday or event or trip. If there is a trip that is scheduled, for instance, PSSAs were scheduled within Ramadan, and we did not have any of our students participate in that. If the parents had asked for an extension, we used the makeup days for that.
One other thought is if we're unable to change the holidays for the next year, is it possible to maybe rearrange some of the PLT days to correlate with some of those if it worked out? Where they would get a half day versus a whole day.
Who would get a half day?
The students, if it's a PLT day, don't they get out early? So if, for example, if there was a holiday that came in April and we had a PLT day in April, but we didn't have.
We could certainly take a look at that. The board
It's just a thought.
just would need the board to identify the holidays that we'd be looking at. My assumption is, but there could be more, would be Diwali and Eid al-Fitr.
And just as Kathy mentioned, right, we got an email. So, Ms. Greitis, you mentioned that there is the process for when someone needs to take a holiday during an assessment or other days? Is that how widely known and understood is that across the board? Because I got a feeling that it's not widely known. Like, I've been in the district 15 years and I did not know that. I thought it was literally just for, the excused absence for like trips and college visits and things like that. I was not aware that it was for.
We can certainly add that as a practice to our handbooks, if that would make it.
Okay.
I mean, I know that in the past there have been families who take a second day to a Jewish holiday if they're very religious. And I mean,
not to interrupt you, I just pulled up our absence form, and when it's reasons for absence, religious holiday is actually listed as one of our reasons for an absence. So it is on our website on our attendance forms.
We could put it in the family handbooks too, and give it its own
Easier.
header. What I would suggest is, we could put together, Linda and I could work on a draft of 23, 24, so that the board could see it sooner than later. Not for approval, but we could look at it in June and July. We can look at it this summer. And that way, I agree with Sue. The sooner the better to notify families for planning purposes. And then we can certainly take a look at where the traditional start of the school year is, where Labor Day falls, and then see what that does to the back end of the calendar. Because that will certainly, I think Kathy makes a good point. I think there's a reality there that may generate other questions, whether it's about other holidays or why do we always do breaks at certain time. I know what a neighboring district a few years back changed, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but they changed spring break from a whole week to like a Wednesday to Monday. And it took, they advertised it for a full year and still people were surprised when it happened. And so it's almost like you need to advertise a year and a half ahead.
And Mike, how does that work with our contracts that we have with our different unions too, with either switching spring break days or things?
We'll have to look at all that. There are certain days that are already earmarked, and so we'd have to pencil a lot of those in. And there's a couple of assumptions that we would have to make, but it's pretty well delineated in each of the contracts. So I don't see that as too much of a hindrance. But there are certain things that are collectively bargained, and we have to place those in there.
Right, just so that we're not.
So the board knows too, we have to have, for our students in 1st through 12th grade, they have to have 990 hours of instruction and 180 days. You can't get 180 and do 989 hours. You have to have both.
Right.
And kindergarten has to have 900 hours of instruction. I've always found it fascinating that if you only do half-day kindergarten, you only have to have 450. But if you do full-day kindergarten, you have to have 900. So if you had like 800, even though you still have a lot more than the half-day kindergarten, it doesn't count. So and then we usually, right now, with all due respect to the state, they're reconciling our 2018-19 year right now. So they're a little bit behind in those. Generally, the classes that you worry about there's 500 districts they have to audit, but the grades that you generally worry about, especially when you have a lot of inclement weather, are seniors in kindergarten. Those are the two. So, but we're out of the inclement weather days for this year, and the seniors they're ready. They are so ready.
We took our third snow day.
We did not.
Are you going to give it back?
We are finishing on June 9th.
That's all.
That's next year. Or is it June 9th or June 10th? Did I say the wrong date?
We work 12 months.
But we don't get a day back?
We're going to, nope, we're finishing the year.
You're going to make the students, does teachers have to work 181 days?
They have to work more already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Question about holidays to consider. I would ask that we also add Lunar New Year to that, but also want to bring up the fact that when planning, and I know you said you'll get us a draft early, but Eid rotates, it moves each year. So I think we have to consult with some of our local religious leaders to figure out how that works. Because I know in the city we celebrate it, and I believe last year I believe it moves based on when Ramadan is, and Ramadan is not at the same time every year. So in terms of planning, there has to be some flexibility built into the calendar because I'm not sure how far in advance we would know when Ramadan's going to be in order to plan when Eid is. So we'll want to reach out to some of our community members who celebrate, because they're probably our best first choice for that information, and then also reach out to some religious leaders in that community so that we get the most accurate information so we can try to do that planning.
We will. And that's a great point. I was reading the same thing. We also have to have a very practical conversation because of the technical school schedule. And we need to be similar to what Upper Marion and Norristown are doing. So I'll make sure. And then there's also busing schedules. There's just, and I'm not trying to minimize any holiday. there's a practical application to operating the district. And so we definitely want to be on the same page as the districts that we share the tech school with, because we're talking about, for us, it's 100 plus kids, it's 500 plus, it's 800 plus kids, about 200 for us. So
Wondering what you think would be best practice to compare what other districts are doing. Philadelphia is obviously the most multicultural around us, but do we want to look at what other Montgomery County schools are doing? Do we care? Are we still going to do our own thing? I mean, I don't know how many schools still just do, the old school, a couple Christian holidays and a couple Jewish holidays, and they call it a day. I want to be progressive and do the right thing, but also don't want to necessarily throw in too many holidays where now it's, you guys know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
we can't celebrate every little thing,
And
but
we
we
need
don't
the
want to disrespect
continuity of
any
education, and
Yes.
you know how hard it can be as a teacher to 3 days in, 4 days in.
But just curious what the other schools are doing, and if there might be, somebody else's lead that we might be able to follow, that could be helpful.
But I do think that's a good thing to really look at too, is our continuity of instruction and education with, we know kids need to be in our schools. I think if we can really let families know that if there is a holiday that they need to not be here, that is okay. But I think I really want to make sure that, we need our kids in school too, as much as possible. So really looking at all our holidays, even ones maybe that we've used in the past. And
I've asked the IU at the next countywide superintendent's meeting to put it on the agenda.
Oh, awesome.
So hopefully we can get a Google form going and compare and contrast what each. Jess and I started doing our own, but it's a lot easier when we all meet to have everybody.
Especially with Upper Marion and Norristown.
Yep. Plus we have students that attend MCIU programs. We have special education programs that are offsite where you may have 5, 6, 7 districts sending students. So, we already have to navigate it's all doable. We just have to have proactive conversation.
Yeah, I think that the reaching out to the other schools is certainly a great starting point, but at the end of the day, it is really about our community. So what's the process going to look like? Find out from our community what works best. I don't have the answer, but I'm just putting that out there about the intentionality of involving our community in this process.
One other consideration too, especially if, say even if it's 90% of our community doesn't celebrate these holidays and their offices aren't going to be closed. A lot of people, and you said the advertising for spring break, which people know about. I don't think there's going to be too many people tracking when Diwali is each year. And they're going to be, why are my kids home today? We have got to consider that as well. Ideally, I'd want to have a scenario where we could honor the holiday, make people know we're accepting, because we do a lot of education on these holidays as well. I know students have come in and like, oh, today is this, I've learned about it. It's not something that we celebrate, but my friend, he has it. So that way, if we could honor the holidays and make it known, if you're celebrating, this is an excused absence if you're celebrating, but if it's something that doesn't affect 98% of the students, that we're adding it in an unofficial capacity, but not a day off from school. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful with that, because then it winds up sending the message that somebody's holiday is more important than others. And therefore, you have to come to school on my holiday, but we'll do a lesson on it. But on your holiday, everybody gets to stay home. And I think that, I hear what we're saying as far as continuity of instruction. As someone who sits in the educator seat, I think our biggest disruption of education due to holidays is in September, because we have so many holidays when we come in, then we're right back out, and we're in, we're out, and then there's Columbus Day. Actually, we're not home for Columbus Day here. That's in the city. But then Veterans Day comes right behind that. So between September and November, the number of days, we don't have Veterans Day here? Oh, that's also in the city. Okay, well, apparently we don't vote. But the in and out just really gets a hard time to get started. So, but I do understand what we're saying about, like, making sure that everything is not a holiday, but also just making sure that we are not sending unintended messages about the value of one holiday over the other.
I think it's about balance, and then ultimately it will also be unrelated to holidays. It could potentially be a change. And so the broader conversation about change and communicating it clearly, the rationale, including people in the conversation. And so I think if we start with respectfully 23, 24, it will allow us that opportunity to communicate effectively.
And regarding change, I don't know how many years ago we tried to change spring break and make it not a 5-day break. And the uproar in the community and among our teachers was just no, I know that's what you would rather have. I'm just telling you that it was, I don't know if anybody here remembers it. It was quite a to-do when we tried to make an alteration to that. So I think Dr. Christian's point of lots of time, lots of discussion, lots of transparency, and lots of notice is really, really important.
When I came to the district 5 years ago, after I was named superintendent in April, I came to the board meeting. The Chester County Intermediate Unit shared with me the results of the focus groups that were held with teachers, parents, administrators. And one of the top 5 responses was do not touch spring break. Because obviously somebody looked at the calendar where I was working and saw that it was a Wednesday to a Monday or a Thursday to a Monday rather than the week before. They didn't look to the previous place where I worked where it was a full week. So there's always sort of some sacred things in every school district. But to Kathy's point, March is a long haul.
We heard you anyway.
You did. So.
Comments on that. And then the last thing we have is a board policy review. Now that you're finally ready, Karen. Finally.
And seated. Okay, thank you. We are going, the recommendation is that we revise policy 233, which is suspension and expulsion. The recommendation is that we follow the PSD wording of this policy, which reflects added and updated language throughout the policy for better clarification and wording that is in compliance with Chapter 12. Chapter 12 of the school code is students and student rights. So this would clarify the compliance with Chapter 12 regulations, including due process requirements for formal hearings and provisions for the student's education when they are suspended or expelled. So this policy does discuss exclusion from school and the number of days that are allowed. Informal hearings and due process rights for this, exclusion from class for in-school suspension, again, due process as well, expulsion and the number of days, and also dealing with compulsory education, but depending upon the student's age, expulsion hearings and the regulations involved with that, attendance and schoolwork during suspension and prior to expulsion, attendance and schoolwork after expulsion, and also the delegation of responsibilities. So that's all outlined. This is also recommended as a legal liability.
You look like you have a question, Gail. I do, but it wasn't related to that. So I was giving everyone the opportunity, had a question. I apologize. I couldn't hit the button. I don't mean to go backwards. I don't mean to go backwards, but I just had one question. So when we were talking about the calendar So, and I get the whole spring break, cutting it down from 5 days to 3 days. But traditionally, right, that spring break is leading up to the Easter holiday. And so that week is, Holy Week. So if we did change it, would they still be eligible for an excused absence? So if we change it from 3 days, from 5 days to 3 days, and someone said, I'm going to be absent on 2 of those days, so they get the 5 days, not teachers, I'm talking about students, because that's still part of their religious week. Will that still be an excused absence?
That would, my initial reaction is that would be a challenge, just because I think we could probably find, and I'm not an expert, but we could probably find other holidays that are longer than 1 day, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. And so at some point, there just has to be compulsory attendance, and we have to get those 180 in, and you have to be done by June 30th. Even if you have the snow days, if you have a strike, if you have all those things. I lived through one strike as a teacher, very brief, but even with that, that it wasn't very long, but it extended the year significantly. So that would be a challenge, I think, Gail.
Easter week is interesting though, because
it is. It's always spring break is always the week leading to up to.
But
Easter.
as a Christian, we only really celebrate Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and maybe Easter Monday. So
I'm a Christian too, and I celebrate the whole week.
You celebrate the whole week. Okay, so
but,
that's what I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and that's not really the reason I was asking.
Okay.
More so, my next question, my follow-up question is that I don't know why spring break is that week, because other districts do have spring break in a different week. In terms of changing the weeks, why does it have to be that week? Could it be a different leading up to Easter as opposed to right after Easter? Right. So meaning that, right, the holiday, like for most people as a Christian, it is Thursday, Friday, and then Sunday. So if we had Thursday, Friday, Monday, I think from a religious perspective that satisfies it, or change the weeks.
We can take a look at it. I think it's probably been, it's been that way for 5 years, and I'm sure it was probably that way for 25 years. But, we can take a look at multiple options. It's just about communicating again. So I want to, for folks who are watching right now, it sounds to me like we're going to keep our next year's calendar in place. It's already approved. And then any possible changes will be starting to discuss this later this school year, this summer. So that there's ample time, if there are changes, that families can adjust.
Going back to this policy, is there something in here that perhaps I'm missing around like a temporary placement? I know we have situations where we place students temporarily pending a hearing. Is that in here somewhere? Should that be in here? Does that need to be outlined, or is that just counted as suspension, like a 45-day placement? Okay.
That part is not in here. This is just talking about the number of days that are permitted and the student rights that are involved. So I think this is more in line with what student rights are when talking about suspension and
School code covers. The school code absolutely covers, and so that does not contradict the school code, but school code gets more specifically as it relates to those 45-day placements, and we have to follow that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And I think that is covered under student discipline policy.
It should be, especially when we talk about disciplining students with IEPs.
Any other comments about this lovely policy? Okay. Any public comment?
There's none at this time.
Any board comment? Would anybody I'd like to do this now because then it doesn't have to happen on email. Any ideas of future agenda topics for this committee? I know we're going to talk. Yeah, Jim. I know we're going to do obviously more discussions about the survey and the committees with regard to the website. And we'll get, I forget my other thought. Go ahead.
I know we love hearing from our public. We love public comment. The more, involvement, the better. But have we thought about our policy for how many minutes public comment can be? And I think I've looked at some other districts. I think we're a little bit on the longer side with our 5 minutes. Maybe we can just explore that moving forward.
I think that's something we've talked about many times over the years, and I think that anyone who wants to speak publicly, my feeling is you can say in 3 minutes pretty well what you want to say. No, you don't think so, Claudia? Claudia's an expert at this. Yeah. You do know, I mean, you can come back and speak again after everyone has spoken. So you
I
could.
was going to say that
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
So we can look to add that to an agenda for a future.
Yeah, I
for
think it's a
meeting-
great,
for
it's a
discussion.
great subject.
Yeah,
for
definitely don't want to discuss
conversation.
it now because
Right.
I want to make sure people know it's what
Right.
we'll discuss.
But I think also, and maybe, maybe people don't know that if they can come up a second time. So just going over our whole public comment policy and procedures.
Love it.
I would have to go through and look at it all. It might be.
So that, I mean, that could be changed to 3 and 2 if there is. That still gives you a total of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. But I know we're not going to discuss this fully.
Right. Yeah, no, we'd go over what the current policy is first, of course. Okay, love that. Anything else that anyone can think of? Definitely think some, athletic department updates would be great. Whether we're talking about how our teams are doing, I'd love for maybe our athletic director to come talk about, I don't know, whatever, just getting an update. Because I know that I feel like the community relations, student life was where we always would get our athletics updates. So I think that would be great.
So we're going to have, I know we're going to be having a board workshop shortly, but one of the products I was hoping out of that would be that board chairs this coming summer and the committees as well, the smaller groups, meet with their administrative liaison that they work with.
Love it.
And generate topics and then come back to the whole board and say, here are the topics that CRSL is looking to do for 22, 23. Are there any additional ones you'd like to add? And so I'd like each of the chairs to come up with 3 to 5 topics. And I want to do those really well. And if it ends, I'd rather not have 13 or 14 that we sort of just scratch the surface. Sure. Right.
Sure.
So hopefully after our workshop, there'll be some more clarity on that.
And I think looking back at prior agendas from 2-3 years ago sometimes can generate some ideas of, we haven't talked about that in a while. And then also like our Hall of Fame, our Hall of Athletes, where we are with that. I know that was a thing that Terry was really working hard on.
We were on a roll with it, and then COVID hit.
Right.
So
finding that back into the mix.
Yeah. And I was going to add that I think that everybody on the board should know that if you have a subject or a topic that you think needs to be discussed, please let either your board chair know, or the administrative liaison know. You're welcome to, make suggestions of things to be added to the agenda.
That's all I got. I'm pretty good. All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.